Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. We are on the dev server for Hornet Sting. This is the first version of the dev server. I'm sure there'll be a few others, but this one mainly looks at the vehicles that they're adding in the next update. Obviously, since this is the dev server, everything is subject to change. There's a metric ton of bugs in this one, and also there is a lot of random graphical settings. At least for me, that got reset. So if things look a little bit janky, that's basically why. I've also changed up some of the processing and rendering side of things. So let me know what you think. Does it look good? Do you want it to look better, worse, so on and so forth, and all of that stuff. And as always, when it comes to this, we'll be doing a metric ton of videos on the dev server. We'll be doing these videos, which are like new ground, new air, new naval, stuff like that, general videos, and then we'll do videos which look at specific areas. So the new maps, new individual vehicles, new mechanics, and all of that stuff. So over the next few days, that's what you're going to get. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe and also like this video. Let's get into it. The first the first vehicle that we're going to have a look at is the XM246. This is a new SBAA which is coming in for America, and it borrows different ideas from different places. Basically, what you have is an M48 chassis, and then you have two 35mm Orlecan KDAs which are mounted upon it. This is similar to stuff like the Gepard, the Chieftain Marksman, and even, the Leopard 2 with the Marksman turret on it in the Swedish tech tree. It's basically the same idea across the board. The only difference between this one and them is the guns are mounted a lot closer together, which means that you don't have to worry as much about convergence, but it also means you don't cover as much of the sky. It's not a huge thing, but it is at least something. The XM246 is found in the standard American tech tree. You can find it here between the M163 and the M247. The major thing that this thing could get access to in the future is a HEVT round as well, but unfortunately right now it doesn't have access to it. This big bulbous on the front of it is the tracking radar director, and then also it has the search radar antenna on top of it. So it does have search and tracking. They work in third person too, which is really nice. And it also has a fully updated DM that you can see right here, including the turret ring and also the electronic equipment and the FCS over here too. It's a 3-man crew, so if you get penned in the turret, you're gonna die. And since it is the 35mm, you get all of the standard rounds. They're a little bit bugged right now, just to kind of let you know. The DM23, if you select it and play with it, it only gives you 40 rounds. So I think they're going to do the same setup that the Gepard has, where you have that small belt and then the large belt. So you can bring a small belt of DM23 and a large belt of DM13 or DM11A1 if you want to. All of the other factors are pretty standard. The targeting speed on it is incredibly good for this large of a turret. This kind of reminds me of the Sergeant York, where you can just flip it and whip it around the place. It also does have access to smoke grenades, which is actually kind of nice. The weird thing about it, though, as you may have noticed, is you have kind of like an optical port on this side with a 12x zoom, but on the other is the smoke grenades. So the smoke grenades only launch one way. So you have to be very careful with your coverage, because you'll never get covered on the left-hand side, at least when it comes to the setup. I'll show you what I mean in terms of this, because it looks really awkward and odd with it. But it's something that if you're trying to defend against AAs, or if you're trying to defend against stuff which is falling from the sky, it's something to take into account. So when you hit the smoke grenade button, you can see it only fires them this way. So it kind of covers you from the front, but you do have this whole area over here where you can get targeted. Just to kind of show you the search, by the way, it does work in third person, and you can see the turret rotation here as well is actually really nice. Another thing they've also changed in ground, this is something we'll go into a little bit later on, but we might as well just kind of go through it here. They've changed the sparking effects when it comes to the way... Oh, I didn't even realize I had this commander view. This actually looks really cool. But they changed the effects of when you're hitting vehicles, so you have way more kind of smoke and stuff come off of them. You can see that T90 there, where it just has a bunch of smoke because of this 35. And obviously with the larger caliber, the more smoke you're going to actually get. So that's pretty cool. They've also supposedly updated the ADATs. They talked about it on the dev stream. It has the slow machine gun. It looks normal. I don't know. Like this very much feels like, remember when they updated that kind of Chinese vehicle, and they gave it a little new look of paint and some very small changes. The same comes with this ADATs. For Germany, you get 2 new vehicles, and also the bring back of some pretty cool sounds for guns that people may remember. So we'll start off with the CLOVIS. The CLOVIS is coming to the German tech tree, and it's also coming to the French tech tree. In the German tech tree, it's going to be a pre-order premium that you can purchase right now. You can see it here at rank 5. And then also for France, it's coming in as a GE vehicle, which is quite nice. So you can just buy it when it turns up. Now, the CLOVIS is very similar to the DF105. They both have the 105mm and also access to the heat shell. This heat shell is not like a normal heat shell, though. This one actually has access to a big propulsion and will do a ton of post-pen damage. Very much feels more like a Heat FS than a standard heat shell. The other thing that you may have also noticed here that this does, or this shows, is you do actually get a really cool amount of information now on the stat cards for these pieces of ammunition. So it just gives you way more info. It's not all right. You can see there, it actually talks about this thing only penning 5mm, but I'm sure they'll actually get it right as it goes along. The CLOVIS also is based on the Marder chassis, which, we have a bunch of them in game now. Stuff like the Marder 1, the 1A3, things like that. And also, it has access to smoke grenades, and the key difference between this and the DF105 is it gets this, the 20mm CN20 F2 automatic cannon. There's a lot of French vehicles where they just really like adding this 20mm as a coaxial, and it works really well. It's fantastic to see on this vehicle, and also all of the others that are around. So you're going to get the kind of best of both worlds here. For me personally, I generally think this is just better than the DF105, and yeah, it's a premium version. So technically it's kind of pay to win, because this is also a scout, and it will also get scouting on top of it. Then we have another vehicle, which is being shared by the French and the Germans, and this is the PZSPWG P204F pack. What this is an AMD-35 that the Germans captured during the Second World War, and instead of keeping the standard turret, they modified it, gave it an open-top turret, and slapped the Puma gun on it, or the longer-barreled 50mm. This is very similar to an event vehicle that they brought in a little bit ago, which came in this one, which has the shorter-barreled L42 50mm. This variant over here, which is the new one, this has the same gun as the Puma that you can find here. So I believe it's the L60, which is just a lot longer barreled, so therefore more penetration and great power. This vehicle, also being based on the AMD, is four-wheeled, has not a huge engine, it's only 105 horsepower, but it should be able to motor around at a good click, and generally I think that's pretty good. Also, with the four-man crew, so if your front driver gets taken out, as long as the driving controls don't get taken out, you can still motor around and have a good time. And with this gun having very good penetration for 2.7, you will do fantastically well. You may remember the Puma itself used to be at 2.7, and because of the gun and because of the mobility, it was incredibly good. And now you basically just get what is a mini Puma at 2.7 once again. Now, I'm going to take a bit of time to talk about some of the gun sounds, because, of course, when it comes to ground, that's kind of important. They talked about on the dev streams earlier that they have brought back a lot of the old gun sounds from very old, kind of like 2014, 2015 era of War Thunder, and they have modernized them. So they've removed a lot of the kind of gun sounds we've had the last few years, and they have basically brought them back, or brought back the old ones and brought them with a new lick of paint. So, for example, I'm going to show you the Jagdtiger and the IS-2, and you may be very nostalgic when it comes to these types of sounds, as I am when hearing them. So here is the Jagdtiger. big kadunks, right? Just beautiful to hear. That was a sound that was terrifying to hear when Ground first came out, because you knew that you were about to get plonked. And then we have the IS2, which they must have updated the model on, because the good old the good old bushes don't work on it. But this also had a very unique sound, and something that just would ring through your ears as you were using it. And this is what the 122mm, and this is not just for the IS2, but the IS3, the IS4, the IS6, all of those vehicles. But this is what it sounds like. As many old players will tell you, there is a lot of nostalgia around these types of sounds, and it's just, my God, it is amazing to hear them once again. It is just absolutely fantastic. Anyway, let's move on to the next set of vehicles. First of all, we have the 2S19M1. This is an interesting vehicle. It's another SPH, which is a conglomeration of factors, I think is probably the way to put it. It's a very modern Russian SPH, so just like a lot of SPHs, it's built off of a lot of other vehicles. There are two variants that are coming in. You have the M1, which is right here in the tech tree between the 268 and the IT1, and then also you have the 2S19M2, which is going to be at 7.3 and a squadron vehicle. So you have this one here, and then you have this one here. So what is the difference between these? So first of all, the gun. The M2 has the M2 2A65, where the M1 just has the 2A64. And this gun should be a slightly longer barrel. It also should have access to technically better shells. I don't know whether the shells are actually fully modeled yet. I'm pretty sure they're just copying them off another vehicle, so we can't really tell what this vehicle is going to do yet. But we'll talk more about that later. I just remember on some of the streams they were talking about that it's not fully finished. The other thing is this is based off a T72 chassis, but also has elements of the T80 in it. And if you have a look at this vehicle, it has a 780 horsepower engine, the diesel one, but then also it can go fast really well, but it can't reverse. So pretty standard Soviet experience, unfortunately. And with these SPHs, you do need a lot of mobility in order to get in and get out. The other thing is this thing is huge, and even though it's based on a T72 chassis, it only has 15mm worth of armor. So they really stripped like all of the armor out of this thing. You are not going to be able to stop anything. It's only 15mm on the front too, so you better be the one who shoots first. And also, you can see this crazy autoloader in the back, which loads the shells, not just the charges, but also the heads of it too. You can bring 50 rounds, which is way too much. And then also, you have 5 crew, 1 in the bottom, and then 4 in the turret too. So really well modeled and really nice. The other difference between the M1 and the M2 is the M2 has access to a better reload. It actually has a improved reload from 7.5 to 6. And the other thing is they have also improved the power plant on this. So it has an 840 horsepower engine instead of the M1, which has a 780. So overall, it's just a massive direct upgrade. You can see the gunner optics as well on both of the vehicles is exactly the same, so that doesn't change. But being able to motor about, at least forward, and also getting more shots off with this is going to be really nice. Doesn't have access to a laser rangefinder, doesn't have access to anything like that, but at least in its core, it's just going to be a fun donk machine for the squadron vehicles and for the standard tech tree. Then we have some British machines. We have the Harry Hopkins 1. This is going to be a new rank 2 battle rating 2.3 light tank. This one was developed basically after the Tetrarch to fill the role of the Tetrarch. And then the British realized, wait, we don't need this thing because we could just use American tanks. So I'm guessing somebody was having a bit of fun because they ended up naming this vehicle after the guy who negotiated a lot of the Lend-Lease products between America and Britain. So the fact that this thing is called the Harry Hopkins and was also replaced by a bunch of Lend-Lease tanks from America is kind of ironic. The vehicle has access to a 2-pounder. It has a 15-degree gun depression, which is really nice, has obviously a great reload rate, and surprisingly, even though it's a light tank, it does have some decent armor on the front of it. 38mm is nothing to scoff at. It's not going to stop a lot of rounds, but what it'll do is it'll reduce the kind of penetration of the rounds, and therefore they won't have as much of a cone of damage, which is quite nice. This is only on the front of it, though. On the sides, it only has 14mm, which of course is terrible. But at least from the front, you're a little bit tanky, which is quite nice. So that's at least something to look at. You do have the classic British 3-man crew, though, very similar to the Valentine. So if you're able to pen here, the whole thing goes kablowy. You also have this that you can go through, and the turret ring only being 14mm. If you're accurate enough to aim for that, you can pretty much destroy this thing with anything that's around. Then we have another side of the scale. We have a Canadian vehicle, and it's kind of surprising they label this as a Canadian vehicle, because with Great Britain, of course, Britain uses this too. This is the tracked Rapier. And being the tracked Rapier, you can see its name. It's the tracked Rapier launch vehicle RCM 748. And this is a combined vehicle. So the Rapier missile system started as basically a stationary system, and it only had access to 4 missiles, 2 on either side. So what they decided to do is to make a mobile version, which is this one. It has access to 8 missiles, and then also a search and tracking radar, which you can see in this little component here. Now, it does get third-person tracking, so it makes it a lot easier. It also does have IRST, if you want to use that too, and it has all of its crew in the front of it in this weapon system. You also have a kind of updated damage model for it, which is really nice. And of course, being at 10.0 at the moment, it actually has a different BR to some of the AAs that are at this BR, but not others. You can see they've really just added a metric ton of AAs here for Britain, which is really good. They should do this for every nation. So you have the Rapier, the Stormer AD, and the HVM, and then also the OSA and the Strela, which have turned up too. The Rapier gets access to thermals, Gen 1 thermals. It also gets smoke grenades on the front of it so you can hide, and it gets an upgraded missile, the Rapier Mark II. You start off with the Mark 1E, and the major difference between the two is the Mark II has 1 kilometer more launch range, but that's it. Everything else is basically the same. I would also say these missiles do feel a lot more maneuverable than other ones that we've seen, which makes a huge difference for the vehicle, because if you've ever played stuff like the Florak Panzer or even the Roland, it is really, really annoying to actually use those vehicles as anti-air. If you use them as, kind of hybrid stuff, it's a bit better, but the missiles just don't move enough to follow the optics. With the Rapier, it's a lot better. So that, to me, is much, much better. I do want to make a quick note for China, by the way. So we made a video earlier, which looked in the files for the Chinese vehicles, and there was a VT5 there, which is probably one which is going to come to China. And then also there was another vehicle in there, which I didn't show, but I will do at a future date. It is a VT5 Up Armored Edition. So it's just a more chunky VT5. And that, my guess, will be one will be like a squadron vehicle or a premium, and the other one will be a standard tech tree vehicle. So just as a little note as we are there. Now with Italy, Italy gets a new MBT, but it is a copy of another MBT. It's the Ariete, and this is the Certeza. The Certeza has access to a camouflage net, which looks really nice. And I've always enjoyed the look of the Ariete. For me, it's a fun vehicle to see, not exactly a fun vehicle to play. This one is at 11.7. It's at the same BR as the standard PSO and Ariete, which this one is based off of. And the only difference, as I said, is the camouflage net and the barbed wire at the bottom. If you want to take off the camouflage net, you can do, and it will still keep the ring of power at the bottom there, and also like the little insignias that are there, but generally it won't really make too much of a difference. So yeah, it's nice to see this. It has all the other factors that the Ariete has. So it has the Gen 2 thermals, the smoke grenades, the DM53, the LWSLR, and also the buffed reload rate, which the Arietes got recently to try and help them out. It also, as you can see, has a modified exhaust. So instead of just going straight outwards, it's more extended, which is quite cool. Now, the other thing about this vehicle, though, is the fact that it will be very good for kind of researching through the Italian tech tree, and I wonder what will happen with the Centauro RGO, which is here too. Will it disappear? Will it move around? Who knows at the end of the day? I'm sure we'll find out soon. The other vehicles that we have are for France, and they're ones that we have seen before. So all of these are in the French tech tree, but they are just copies of the German ones that we talked about before. So you have the AMD 35 pack. This is exactly the same as the German one. You have the Marder DF105, which is a copy of the German Marder DF105. They are adding it to the French tech tree, which is pretty cool. And then also you have the CLOVIS, which is another vehicle we've talked about previously. If you want to see where they are in the tech tree, you have the AMD 35 here, which is between the AMC 35 and the Crusader. You also have access to the Marder DF105 here after a new group, which is the AML 90 and AML 1390. And then the last vehicle, the CLOVIS, is on this side here at 8.0. Remember, this is going to be a GE version, which I think is generally pretty cool. There's a ton of other changes which are coming to ground vehicles as well, more updated models and also more kind of balance changes that are around. You can see here with the M1A2 SEP, they're actually adding in the full turret ring for this thing, which looks really cool, but we'll cover that in a later video. Mainly what we see here is a lot of really cool and interesting vehicles for ground, and hopefully people enjoy them as we go on. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.